It's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with the headlines. A North Korean submarine fires a ballistic missile into the East Sea in what officials are calling an armed protest against an ongoing South Korea-U.S. military drills. The missile went well into Japanese airspace. In a three-way meeting, the foreign ministers of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan agreed to lead the international community in responding to North Korea's provocations. South Korea's Olympic athletes get the welcoming ceremony they deserve as they return home. The sports minister personally commended them for their efforts. North Korea has once again fired off a ballistic missile from a submarine, and the South's assessment seems to indicate there have been significant technological upgrades since the last launch. Seoul's military calls the move an armed protest against an ongoing South Korea-U.S. military drill that started earlier this week. Kim Hyun-bin has our top story.
South Korea's defense ministry said Wednesday that North Korea fired off a submarine-launched ballistic missile that flew roughly 500 kilometers before falling into the East Sea. The SLBM was fired earlier in the day from a submarine in waters off the eastern city of Sinpo. Officials added that the missile breached Japan's air defense identification zone by about 80 kilometers.
North Korea's SLBM launch is a threat to South Korea's security, and we caution that the act is a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions. We will maintain joint defense readiness and counter any provocations from the North.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff says the firing was an armed protest against the annual South Korea-U.S. military exercise known as Ulji Freedom Guardian, which started on Monday. North Korea, which had earlier threatened to retaliate, sees the exercise as a rehearsal for a northward invasion, while Seoul and Washington insist the drills are purely defensive in nature. The South Korean military says North Korea has made improvements in terms of its SLBM technology compared to previous launches, adding that a missile of that type that flies more than 300 kilometers can be deemed a success. North Korea's SLBM development poses an extra threat to regional stability and South Korea's national security, as the missiles are practically impossible to detect before launch. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Any type of strong provocation was highly expected during the defensive drills, which the North labels a rehearsal for war. South Korea's top officials quickly held an emergency standing committee session of the National Security Council. Song Ji-sun fills us in on Seoul's prompt reaction.
Just 2 hours after North Korea's missile launch, South Korea's top security officials gathered at the presidential office and held an emergency standing committee session of the National Security Council and called on Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear ambitions.
The South Korean government urges North Korea to immediately stop its nuclear and missile development programs, which threaten the peace and security of the Korean peninsula and the entire world. We urge North Korea to completely abolish its nuclear program in an irrevocable and verifiable way.
Seoul warned Pyongyang that such reckless behavior will result in nothing but its own imminent collapse.
North Korea must realize that focusing only on developing its nuclear and missile capabilities while disregarding its people's livelihoods and their rights will only accelerate its own self-destruction, as it will lead to further isolation and stronger punishment from the outside world.
In the afternoon, President Park Geun-hye visited a frontline army unit as scheduled and met with troops participating in the South Korea-U.S. joint Ulji Freedom Guardian military exercise. Park had already called on full defense conditions before the drill kicked off on Monday, as the North was highly likely to protest with a provocation, proven with Wednesday's launch. The president asked for reinforced preparation and countermeasures to protect the nation, while thanking the soldiers for their efforts. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Turning our attention to Tokyo, where the meeting between foreign ministers of South Korea, China, and Japan are held. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe strongly denounced North Korea's SLBM launch, which breached Japan's air defense identification zone. According to Kyodo News Agency, Abe called it, quote, intolerable violence that poses a grave threat to regional security. He also echoed the South Korean government's response, saying Japan will deal firmly with Pyongyang in close collaboration with the international community. Staying with that meeting, the three top diplomats from South Korea, Japan, and China vowed to take a leading role in countering Pyongyang's threats. Kwon So-hwa has the latest from the Trilateral talks.
North Korea's test of a missile launched from a submarine was conducted on the same day South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and his Japanese and Chinese counterparts Fumio Kishida and Wang Yi met for foreign ministers' talks in Tokyo on Wednesday, demonstrating a need for strong trilateral cooperation.
At today's meeting, we agreed to lead the international community's response to North Korea and urge North Korea to both refrain from further provocative actions and comply with the UN Security Council resolutions.
South Korea's top diplomat said that North Korea's nuclear threat is a more serious issue than ever, necessitating increased cooperation on the bi- and trilateral fronts.
We confirmed our common understanding that we will not tolerate the North's nuclear program, and we will work to prevent further provocative actions and implement the UN Security Council resolutions against North Korea.
He had a high praise for Japan and China, both members of the Council, for their commitment to the UN Security Council's latest resolution. China agrees with its counterparts regarding North Korea's missile and nuclear program.
China will continue to uphold the denuclearization of North Korea.
But while South Korea and Japan are currently moving to keep up the pressure on the North,
China will continue to uphold the use of dialogue and consultations to resolve the issue.
and that's not the only difference. Seoul and Beijing are at loggerheads over the deployment of a U.S. missile defense system to the Korean peninsula. And prior to the trilateral meeting on Wednesday, Minister Wang once again expressed China's opposition to the THAAD system at a one-on-one with Minister Yoon. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, the two agreed to keep in touch on the issue, with Minister Yoon saying that a single issue should not be the thing that hampers their bilateral relationship. Talks on extending that relationship could take place later in the year, as the three ministers agreed to work toward organizing a summit for their heads of state following a similar meeting in Seoul last year. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
Turning our sights to domestic political arena now, the ruling Saenuri Party and the government have laid out plans for next year's government budget, even as lawmakers remain locked in debate over a budget supplement for this year. Park Ji-won gives us the updates from the National Assembly.
The ruling Saenuri Party and the government have agreed to increase the national budget for next year by about 3.7%. Under the plan laid out during a meeting on Wednesday, the budget will likely surpass 400 trillion won or 357 billion US dollars, the largest ever for the country. The rise mostly stems from plans to increase funds for job creation, especially for young job seekers and the elderly. The allocation for job creation as a whole is about 10% higher than the previous year, while the sum for youth job creation is more than 15% higher. The budget for culture, sports, and agriculture will likely also see sizable increases. Finance Minister Yoo Il-ho, who was at the meeting, urged lawmakers to pass a pending bill for a multi-billion-dollar budget supplement for this year. He emphasized it must be passed before the Chuseok holiday next month to bring about the maximum benefit to the economy in the second half. Meanwhile, the political parties are still wrangling over whether to deal with the budget supplement first or finalize the witness list for two upcoming hearings. The ruling Saenuri Party urged the opposition parties to pass the budget bill, saying if they fail, the economic potential will be lost.
Although the budget supplement aims to stabilize people's livelihoods amid the crisis in the nation's shipbuilding industry, the opposition parties are politicizing the budget issue, which will block job creation efforts.
The main opposition Minju Party wants to first hash out the witness list for two planned hearings.
The hearing should delve into how and why the shipbuilding industry has reached this point, especially the accounting fraud committed by Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, and the public should be told about the results. Only then can the budget supplement be truly meaningful.
Amid the tug-of-war between the two parties, the minor opposition People's Party has volunteered to act as the mediator. It says it will propose the parties hold the hearing negotiations and budget deliberations at the same time. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
South Korea's national Olympic team has arrived back home after making the nation proud at the 2016 Rio Games. They achieved their goal of finishing in the top 10 by winning 9 gold medals. Our Shin Se-min was at Incheon International Airport where they were greeted by a jubilant crowd.
Proudly walking in with Korea's national flag, the final group of Team Korea's Olympic heroes returned home on Wednesday, finishing up their 17-day sporting journey in Rio. The group, comprised of 70 athletes and a number of team delegates, was welcomed with warm cheers and hugs from their family members and friends. Taking center stage was a ceremony officially disbanding the squad. Korea's Minister of Culture, Tourism and Sports, Kim Jong-duk, thanked all the athletes and the support staff for their stellar efforts in Brazil.
We as a nation are so proud of all of you. Your efforts in Rio in the face of challenging conditions and security concerns brought the Korean people so much joy and excitement. All our athletes showed great sportsmanship and competed in the events fairly.
Korea's rhythmic gymnast star, Son Yeon-jae, who fell short of winning a medal in Rio, said she will take a break to take stock of her future options.
I have no regrets as I performed to the best of my abilities in Rio. I'm going to take some time off to decide what I want to do next.
And previous health concerns over the Zika virus seemed to have evaporated. Korea's Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says there haven't been any confirmed or suspected cases of Zika among the almost 1,000-strong Korean delegation. It said the government and related health authorities will continue to closely monitor the members of the delegation over the next couple of weeks just to make sure there are no issues.
The focus is now on the sporting stars of the snow and ice as they shoot for medals for the Winter Olympics in 2018, which will be held in Korea's alpine town of Pyeongchang. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Incheon.
Already embroiled in an emissions scandal, Audi Volkswagen Korea is once again facing public ire, this time over a manufacturing defect. Plans for a recall of some 1,500 Audi cars have been finalized by Korea's Transportation Ministry. Our Lee Ji-won tells us more.
Audi Volkswagen Korea is set to recall more than 1,500 of its Audi A8 model due to a coolant leak that can cause the engine to stall while the car is in motion. Following an investigation that began last September, Korea's Transportation Ministry said Wednesday that a defect in the car's coolant control valve allows fluid to leak into the engine control unit, causing the fuel pump to stop and the engine to stall. The recall affects a total of 1,534 Audi A8s manufactured from July 2010 to April 2012. Starting Thursday, owners can bring their cars to an Audi customer service center to have the affected parts repaired at no charge. The ministry added that the investigation began amid a stream of similar cases and noted that Korea is the first country to initiate a recall on this model. Since February, in lieu of a recall, Audi Volkswagen had offered free repairs, saying the defect is not a serious safety concern as drivers still have 1 to 2 minutes until the car comes to a complete stop. But the ministry ordered a recall in June and received a plan from the German automaker last week, obligating it to notify affected customers of the problem, repair the cars, and pay them back for any relevant repair costs made prior to the recall. Audi is expected to expand the recall to other markets, including the United States. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
A deadly earthquake hit central Italy early Wednesday, resulting in at least 10 deaths and many more were wounded. The region was also hit hard by a series of aftershocks, some of which were even felt more than 100 kilometers away. For details, we turn to our Kim Ji-yeon.
A deadly 6.2 magnitude earthquake swept over central Italy at the crack of dawn on Wednesday, causing an entire town to disappear under a pile of rubble as buildings and bridges collapsed. The U.S. Geological Survey reported the quake struck at 3:36 a.m. local time, and the epicenter was close to the town of Norta. The tremor was so strong that aftershocks were felt in the capital city of Rome, about 170 kilometers away. An hour later, the same region was hit by an aftershock that registered a magnitude of 5.5. And in the following 3 hours after the original tremor, the town of Amarate recorded 17 aftershocks with varying magnitudes of 4.6 and 4.3. The mayor of Amarate in the hardest hit area told Italian radio half the town is gone and people are buried under rubble. Aside from that, some of the heaviest damage was incurred in the mountainous regions near the epicenter, as most residents were sleeping and were unable to take shelter in time. This is not the first time a devastating earthquake has shaken the region. In April of 2009, more than 300 people died and more than 1,000 were injured in the L'Aquila earthquake, not far from where Wednesday's earthquake struck. Kim Jian, Arirang News.
And we're receiving updates that the death toll has risen to at least 20 in Italy. Our hearts and prayers go out to the victims and their families, and of course the rescuers who are hard at work over there. And that concludes our newscast for this hour. Thank you for watching.